Saint Pambo was a 4th century desert father and disciple of Saint Anthony the Great. Saint Pambo lived the ascetic life in the Nitrian Desert in Egypt. At the beginning of his monasticism, when he came to the brothers, he went and found an old man and said to him, "Teach me a psalm." For he was illiterate, and the old man began to teach him this psalm, which was Psalm 39. "I will watch my ways so as to be unable to sin with my tongue." These words sank deep into his soul, and after the old man had given him the beginning of the text, Pambo stopped him, saying, "My father, since I haven't yet learned the beginning of the text, I will not learn the rest." And when Abba Pambo went to his cell, he spent 8 years putting into practice the saying that he had learned. He met with no one, saying, "Unless I first master my tongue, I will come into contact with no one, lest I fall into sin on the account of my tongue." After the 8 years, he went and paid a visit to the old man who had given him the psalm. The old man said to him, "Pambo, why haven't we seen you until today? Why didn't you come to learn the psalm?" Abba Pambo said to him, "Since I hadn't learned the first verse, I didn't return to you to get the second, since God had not given me the grace until now to learn it. In order not to act as if I despised you, I have come to visit you, my father, for if I learn the first verse, I will come see you again." And when he returned to his cell, he stayed there another 10 years and did not come into contact with anyone again. Thus, when they asked him about something, he answered only after long pondering in prayer. And he would say, "I must think first, and perhaps I can, in time, give an answer with God's help." Saint Pambo was a model of a lover of work for his disciples. Each day he worked until exhaustion and lived by the bread acquired by his own toil. Pambo became known for his dedication to labour and simplicity. He worked every day, usually weaving mats and baskets from palm leaves, and he lived only on what his hands had earned. He wore cast-off clothing, fasted regularly, and practiced deep self-denial. He did not seek comfort or recognition. Instead, he lived as quietly and humbly as possible, always giving his heart fully to God. Like the other hermits around him, Saint Pambo practiced long hours of prayer and embraced hardship with joy. His cell was not a place of isolation, but a holy sanctuary where he continually encountered the presence of God. Another story of Saint Pambo involves the visit of Saint Melania the Elder, a wealthy and noble Roman woman who had devoted her life to Christ. When she arrived in Egypt, she was moved by Pambo's holiness and the overall holiness of the Desert Fathers, and wished to offer support to their communities. And after hearing of the sanctity of Saint Pambo, she was very eager to meet him and was brought to him by the elder Isidore. She brought 300 pounds of stamped silver coins, an enormous sum by any standard. She approached Pambo while he was weaving palm leaves and asked him to accept the money for the needs of the monks. Without looking up from his work, Saint Pambo simply said, "God gives you your reward," and continued weaving. He then turned to his steward, whose name was Origen, and instructed him to distribute the silver among the brethren who lived on the island and in Libya, since these communities were poor and in need. However, he ordered that none of it be given to the monks in Egypt, for they had what was sufficient for their needs. Saint Melania stood silently, waiting for some further acknowledgement or expression of gratitude, but none came. She then said to him, "Master, do you know how much money is in this basket? There are 300 pounds of silver." At this, Saint Pambo calmly responded, still without lifting his gaze, "He who weighed the mountains in a balance knows how much the weight of your silver is. If you had given the money to me, you would have done well to inform me of its weight. But since you have given it to God, who did not despise the 2 mites of the widow, what need have you to tell him? Hold your peace. This moment reveals the depth of St. Pambo's humility. He was not impressed by earthly wealth, no matter how generously given. His eyes were always fixed on the eternal kingdom, and he measured all things by their spiritual worth. St. Anthony once said that the St. Pambo, by the fear of God, inspired within himself the Holy Spirit. And the monk Paimon the Great said, "We beheld 3 things in Father Pambo: hunger every day, silence, and handcrafts." The monk Theodore the Studite termed St. Pambo exalted in deed and in word. It was also said that sometimes St. Pambo's face shone like lightning, as did the face of Moses. Speaking to the brethren who stood about his deathbed, St. Pambo said, "I go to the Lord as one who has not yet begun to serve him." St. Pambo lived his whole life in the desert, quietly forming a generation of holy men who would become pillars of the early church. Among his disciples were Dioscorus, who later became bishop of Hermopolis, as well as Ammonius, Eusebius, and Euthamius, and Origen, each of whom followed in the same path of asceticism, humility, and prayer. These men, trained by St. Pambo, would go on to influence both Egyptian and broader Christian monasticism for centuries to come. And he died at the age of 70. Thanks for watching.